America, 1930s. A land of jazz, speakeasies, and smoke-filled back rooms. The Great Depression had left millions broke, hungry, and desperate. Banks were failing, families were starving, morals cheaper than a glass of bathtub gin. But when the law cracks down, the shadows get rich. And in those shadows, the Mafia thrived. Bootlegging, gambling, loan sharking, money flowed where the law could not reach. In this ruthless new world, muscle could take you far, but brains could take you further. And that's where one quiet, sharp-eyed immigrant boy from Grodno, Poland, found his place. His name was Meyer Lansky. Small in stature, barely 5'4". No reputation as a killer, no thirst for blood. On the streets, they called him Little Man. But don't let the nickname fool you. Behind those glasses and that calm demeanor was a mind that could count faster than any gun could shoot. Lansky understood something the other mobsters didn't. Violence might control a block, a neighborhood, maybe even a city. But money controlled everything. And Meyer Lansky was about to turn the American underworld into his own kind of Wall Street. New York's Lower East Side, a concrete jungle packed with immigrants chasing the American dream and finding only sweatshops, slums, and survival. It was here, in these crowded streets, that young Meyer Lansky crossed paths with a boy who would change his life forever. His name? Benjamin Siegel. The streets called him Bugsy. Not to his face, unless you wanted your jaw broken. Bugsy was fire, reckless, violent, unpredictable. The kind of guy who solved problems with bullets before thinking twice. Meyer, he was ice, calm, logical, always 2 steps ahead. Together, fire and ice, they were unstoppable. They started small, dice games in alleys, card tables and smoky back rooms. If someone tried to cheat, Bugsy handled it with his fists. If someone tried to run the numbers, Meyer kept them straight. And in those moments, a partnership was born. But Lansky wasn't just counting pennies. He was studying, watching. He saw how the Italians controlled their neighborhoods, how the Irish ran politics, how the Jews, like him, were often dismissed as small-time players. Meyer Lansky decided he would rewrite the rules. No more ethnic boundaries, no more petty street wars. If money was the goal, and why not build something bigger, something organized? And that's exactly what he did. With Bugsy Siegel at his side, Meyer laid the groundwork for what would soon become the most powerful criminal network America had ever seen. By the early 1930s, New York was a city boiling over with gang wars. Italians, Irish, Jews, everyone fought for territory, for money, for power. Bodies were piling up, and the old guard of the Mafia clung to outdated traditions. But Meyer Lansky, he saw opportunity in the chaos. Through Bugsy Siegel, he was introduced to a rising star in the Italian mob, Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano wasn't like the old dons. He didn't care about rituals, oaths, or who your grandfather was back in Sicily. What he cared about was business, and so did Meyer. The two men couldn't have been more different. Luciano, the charming Italian gangster with a taste for danger, and Lansky, the quiet strategist with numbers running in his veins. But together, they dreamed of something bigger. Why should gangs fight over scraps when they could build an empire? Why spill blood in the streets when money could flow endlessly if they worked together? It was Lansky who pushed the idea. Unify the Italian, Jewish, and other crime groups into a single machine. A machine that would run gambling, bootlegging, extortion, and later, narcotics. He called it the Syndicate. And with Luciano's muscle and Lansky's brains, the National Crime Syndicate was born. It was no longer about neighborhoods. It was no longer about who controlled one block or one racket. It was about power on a national scale. From New York to Chicago, from Miami to Vegas, every crime family would play a part. For the first time in American history, organized crime was exactly that, organized. And at the heart of it sat Meyer Lansky, quiet, invisible, pulling strings like a master puppeteer. With the Syndicate established, Meyer Lansky turned his eyes to what he always believed was the purest form of business: gambling. See, bootlegging would end with prohibition. Drugs were messy, dangerous, and brought too much heat. But gambling? Gambling was eternal, as old as mankind itself. And in Meyer's mind, it could be controlled, taxed, and milked for endless profit. He started small. Racetracks, underground casinos, illegal betting parlors hidden behind cigar shops. But soon, Meyer Lansky was thinking bigger. He saw Miami as a paradise for gambling. He saw Cuba as the perfect playground for American tourists. And he saw Las Vegas not as a dusty desert town, but as the future of organized crime. While Bugsy Siegel took the spotlight with the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas, it was Lansky who handled the money, the math, the planning. He was the accountant behind the empire, ensuring the cash flowed smoothly and quietly into Syndicate pockets. In Cuba, Lansky struck gold. He made deals with dictator Fulgencio Batista, ensuring that every casino on the island was backed and taxed by the mob. Havana turned into a glittering paradise of jazz, showgirls, and high-rolling gamblers. Hollywood stars flew in, politicians rubbed elbows with mobsters, and the house always won. And behind the curtain, Meyer Lansky counted the money, millions upon millions. By the 1950s, he wasn't just another gangster, he was the banker of the underworld. But Meyer had one golden rule: stay in the shadows. No flashy cars, no big mansions, no attention. While others were gunned down in the streets or hunted by the FBI, Lansky stayed invisible. The man who controlled the flow of money, but never let the money control him. For years, Meyer Lansky's paradise thrived. Havana was his crown jewel. The casinos glittered, the money flowed, and the politicians stayed bought. But then came a man with a beard and a rifle. Fidel Castro's revolution exploded onto the island in 1959. The mobsters laughed at first. They thought Castro was just another rebel who'd play ball for the right price. But Meyer Lansky was smarter. He sensed the storm before it hit. And he was right. When Castro's forces took Havana, they didn't negotiate. They marched straight into the casinos, shut down the tables, and seized every last dollar. Overnight, Lansky's empire in Cuba, worth hundreds of millions, was gone, burned, looted, swallowed by the revolution. For the first time, the mob's banker was cornered. Back in the States, the FBI had him under the microscope. Hoover's men tracked his accounts, tapped his phones, followed every move. Politicians who once shook his hand now called him a parasite. And yet, Lansky remained calm. No panicked escapes, no reckless moves. Just the same quiet man with his ledgers and numbers, trying to keep the Syndicate alive while the world closed in. But there was no denying it. The golden age was over. Havana was lost. Vegas was no longer his. And the once invisible king of money was suddenly standing in the spotlight he had always feared. By the 1960s, Meyer Lansky was no longer the untouchable mastermind. He was hounded by the FBI, by prosecutors, even by foreign governments. Desperate for a safe haven, Lansky turned to Israel, the land of his ancestors. He invoked the law of return, demanding refuge as a Jew. For a moment, it worked. He landed in Tel Aviv, walking the streets with a quiet confidence, believing he'd outsmarted the United States once again. But Washington pushed hard. Under pressure, Israel denied him permanent citizenship. Lansky, the genius who had created financial escape routes for hundreds of gangsters, suddenly found no country willing to shield him. He was shipped back to America and straight into the hands of prosecutors. The government tried to bury him with tax evasion and racketeering charges, but Meyer had one last trick. He had hidden his tracks so well, even the FBI couldn't prove where the money had gone. Millions, maybe billions, simply vanished in a fog of offshore accounts. Still, power slipped from his fingers. He was old, frail, battling cancer. The empire he built was inherited by men far more brutal and far less clever. In 1983, Meyer Lansky, the mob's banker, the invisible architect of organized crime, died quietly in Miami. He had outlived Capone, Luciano, Costello, Siegel, Gotti's rise, almost everyone. But when he died, the world was shocked to learn the truth. On paper, Lansky left behind almost nothing. A man who once controlled hundreds of millions died with less than $10,000 to his name. Or so they say. Some whisper his money is still out there, hidden in accounts across Switzerland, the Caribbean, maybe even Israel. A secret treasure of the underworld, waiting to be found. Meyer Lansky never fired a gun. He never ordered a hit. But with a pen, a brain, and a ledger, he built an empire that rivaled kings. And in the shadows of history, he remains the ghost banker of the mob. Meyer Lansky never fired a gun. He never ordered a hit. But with a pen, a brain, and a ledger, he built an empire that rivaled kings. And in the shadows of history, he remains the ghost banker of the mob.